My stepmother organized a celebration at an elite restaurant, but when I arrived, the waiter whispered, "You're not on the guest list." I looked over to her, and she smirked. I sat down anyway and said, "That's fine. I made my own reservation, under your husband's name." The room went silent as he stormed over, holding a $12,000 bill with my name on it. I should have known something was off the moment I stepped into La Belle Maison. The restaurant was one of those places where you needed a reservation weeks in advance, and even then, you had to know someone. The kind of place where the wine list had more pages than the menu, and the bill could cover a month's rent in the city. I had never been there before, but Lorraine, my stepmother, loved it. She loved anything expensive. She loved anything that screamed, "I'm better than you." So, when my dad told me she was having her birthday dinner there and insisted I come, I knew it wasn't about family. It was about the show. But I came anyway, because my father had asked. I adjusted my blazer, stepped up to the host's stand, and gave my name. The host, a man in his early 30s with slicked back hair and a crisp uniform, glanced at his reservation list. Then he frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. Your name isn't on the guest list." I thought I misheard him. "What?" He hesitated, lowered his voice. "The party host specifically requested that you not be added." I felt my stomach tighten. My eyes immediately flicked to the back of the restaurant, to the long candlelit table where a group of well-dressed people sat, glasses clinking, soft laughter floating through the air. And there she was, Lorraine, sitting at the center like a queen, wearing an emerald green dress that shimmered under the chandeliers. Champagne glass in one hand, fingers delicately tapping against the rim. She was laughing at something someone had said, but when she turned and met my eyes, her lips curled into a small, triumphant smirk. That's when I knew. She had done this on purpose. She wanted to humiliate me. A younger version of me would have turned around and left. A younger version of me would have called my dad later, played it off like it was no big deal. But I wasn't that person anymore. I looked back at the host, keeping my voice even. "That's fine," I said. "I made my own reservation, under my father's name." The host's brow furrowed. He flipped through the pages again, his eyes scanning the list. Then I saw the flicker of recognition in his face. "Ah," he cleared his throat. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell. Right this way." I straightened my jacket and followed him. I felt the shift in the air as I approached the table. Conversation slowed, eyes darted toward me. My father, sitting near Lorraine, looked up in surprise. "Lorraine?" She tilted her head slightly, her smirk never wavering. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Calm, unbothered. Lorraine's voice was smooth, honeyed with fake sweetness. "Oh, Evan, I didn't realize you were coming." I smiled back, just as sweetly. "That's funny, because my father invited me." A slight flicker of irritation crossed her face before she covered it with a laugh. "Must have been a mix-up with the reservations." "Must have been," I echoed. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut. My father, clearly sensing something was off, cleared his throat. "Well, since you're here, have a drink. The champagne is fantastic." I poured myself a glass and leaned back, watching Lorraine out of the corner of my eye. She was still playing the part, still basking in the attention. But I knew her, and I knew that look in her eye. She wasn't done yet. About 20 minutes passed. The waiter came and went, taking orders, bringing appetizers. The conversation slowly resumed, though it never fully relaxed. Lorraine made sure to steer most of it toward herself. Stories about her recent trip to Paris, the renovations on their summer home, the ridiculous price of caviar these days. I just let her talk. And then it happened. A deep voice from the front of the restaurant, sharp with irritation. "Excuse me, can I speak to whoever made this reservation?" I turned just as my father stood up, his face tense, his brow furrowed as he snatched a slip of paper from the waiter's hand. "What the HLL is this?" he muttered. I caught a glimpse of it before he turned. A bill. A long one. I watched my father's face change. His eyes darted over the numbers. His grip tightened around the paper. He exhaled sharply through his nose, then turned toward me, holding the bill up. "Evan," he said, his voice tight. "Can I have a word?" The entire table had gone silent. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back. The waiter, looking uncomfortable, handed me the bill. I glanced down. $12,468. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The charges were ridiculous. Bottles of Dom Perignon, Wagyu steaks, imported seafood towers, vintage wines. Things I hadn't even seen yet. Things I hadn't ordered. "This isn't mine," I said. "I just got here. The restaurant says it was ordered under your name." I turned toward the waiter. "Who placed the order?" He hesitated. "It was confirmed under Mr. Caldwell's reservation." And that's when it clicked. I looked up slowly, my eyes landing on Lorraine. She was watching me. A little too calmly. A little too pleased. A slow, sinking realization settled in my stomach. She did this. She planned this. I turned back to the waiter. "Who made the reservation?" The waiter hesitated again. "We received an email confirmation from Ms. Caldwell's assistant earlier this afternoon." Bingo. I turned back toward my father and held out my phone. I scrolled to the email I had received earlier from the restaurant. one confirming the bill had been charged to the same credit card Lorraine used for all her shopping sprees. I turned the screen toward my father. His face darkened as he read it. Lorraine's expression faltered. Just a little. You can explain this, I said smoothly. For the first time that night, Lorraine was speechless. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes flickered to her. Did you do this? His voice was dangerously low. She hesitated. Then, with an exasperated sigh, she leaned back in her chair, twirling her champagne glass between her fingers. Oh, Henry, it was just a joke. A joke? My father's voice was ice. I was just having a little fun with Evan, she said dismissively. It's his fault for showing up uninvited. That's enough. My father cut in, his tone sharp. Lorraine's face tightened. Henry, don't be so dramatic. He turned to the waiter. Cancel this bill. Charge what was actually ordered. Then, slowly, he turned back to Lorraine. His jaw was set. His eyes cold. I'm done, he said simply. Lorraine blinked. What? I said I'm done. With you. Silence. I leaned back in my chair. Lorraine opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in years, she looked truly caught off guard. She had been playing the long game. She just never thought it would end like this. And I wasn't done yet. Lorraine's face twisted in a way I had never seen before. She wasn't used to losing. Not like this. The restaurant had gone completely silent, and the tension in the air was thick enough to suffocate. Even the waitstaff, who were trained to pretend nothing was out of the ordinary, stood frozen near the edges of the dining area, pretending to straighten silverware while clearly eavesdropping. Lorraine's nails tapped against the stem of her glass. A slow, methodical movement. A tell. She was thinking, calculating. Then she laughed. Soft at first, like she was trying to brush off the moment. Then louder, sharper, a little too forced. Oh, Henry, she said, shaking her head. You're being ridiculous. My father didn't respond. He just kept staring at her, his face unreadable. She turned her gaze to me then, her eyes narrowing slightly. And you? I raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of my drink. What about me? You've always been so dramatic, she said, her tone almost bored. So eager to paint yourself as the victim. I almost laughed. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice so only she and my father could hear. You took my name off the guest list, then made sure the bill for your own party was charged to me. You don't get to act like I'm the one making a scene, Lorraine. A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Annoyance. Maybe even a little panic. She turned back to my father, softening her expression. Henry, you're not seriously buying into this, are you? She gestured around. This is my birthday dinner. Are you really going to let him ruin it? My father exhaled sharply through his nose. Lorraine pushed her advantage. Come on, she continued, her voice dipping into that saccharine tone she always used when she wanted something. You're tired. It's been a long week. Maybe you just misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand anything, he said flatly. That shut her up. For a long moment, she just sat there, her fingers tightening around her champagne glass. Then, as if a switch had flipped, she smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. And I knew. She wasn't done yet. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with something dangerous. Fine, she said lightly, lifting her glass. Let's not ruin the night over a silly misunderstanding. Let's eat, drink, and enjoy ourselves. Henry, why don't you order another bottle of that wine you love? My treat. Her voice was smooth, effortless, but I knew better. This was damage control. I glanced at my father, wondering if he would take the bait. His face was tense, torn, and that's when I knew. I had to push harder. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about everything. I set my glass down and leaned in, locking eyes with Lorraine. Tell me something, I said, keeping my voice calm. If this was all just a silly misunderstanding, why did you remove my name from the guest list? The question hung in the air, sharp as a knife. For the first time, Lorraine hesitated. Just for a second. Then she let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. Oh, Evan. Always so sensitive. That's not an answer. She sighed, her patience wearing thin. I didn't think you'd actually show up. I assumed you'd have better things to do. That's interesting, I said, tilting my head. Because you knew I was coming. You heard Dad invite me. Her fingers tightened slightly around her glass again. I pushed further. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I asked. Did you think I'd just leave quietly and let you win? Lorraine's smile twitched. Win? She echoed, amusement creeping back into her voice. Oh, sweetheart, if I wanted to win, you'd already be gone. A chill ran down my spine. I knew she was bluffing. But for a moment, just a moment, I could see it in her eyes. She really did believe she was untouchable. My father shifted beside me, rubbing a hand over his jaw. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me. And I realized, he was watching how I handled this. Lorraine must have realized it, too, because she leaned back and gave me a slow, condescending smile. You've always been so eager for your father's approval, she murmured. It's kind of sad, really. I didn't blink. And you've always been so eager for his money. It's kind of pathetic, really. The smile dropped. Just for a second. My father inhaled sharply, but he didn't interrupt. Lorraine's fingers twitched. Just barely. Then, she laughed again. Lighter this time, more performative. Oh, Evan, she sighed, shaking her head. You've always had such a flair for the dramatic. There it was again. That same condescending tone. The same tone she had used for years. The same tone she had used when she first moved in. When she started throwing out things that belonged to my mother. When she started pushing me out of my father's life. For years, she had gotten away with it. For years, my father had let her. But tonight was different. I could feel it. And so could she. But she wasn't done playing yet. She straightened her shoulders, smoothing out her expression, and turned back to my father with a soft, almost wounded look. Henry, she murmured, reaching for his hand. Don't let him come between us. My father stared at her. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something shift in his eyes. Lorraine must have seen it, too, because for the first time in her life, she actually looked nervous. I wasn't finished yet, and neither was she. Lorraine's fingers barely grazed my father's hand before he pulled it away. It was subtle, just a small movement, but I caught it. She caught it. And for the first time all night, I saw something flash across her face that I had never seen before. Doubt. Just for a second. But she recovered quickly, as always. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, and sighed dramatically, as if the entire situation bored her. This is ridiculous, she muttered, shaking her head. All this fuss over some dinner reservations. I smirked, tilting my head. You mean the dinner you tried to charge me 12 grand for? Lorraine exhaled through her nose, her patience wearing thin. I told you already, it was a misunderstanding. I turned to my father. Dad, do you really believe that? He didn't answer right away. And that silence? That hesitation? It rattled her. For years, she had controlled the narrative. She had always been able to twist situations in her favor, spinning the truth just enough to make me look like the problem. But now, for the first time, my father wasn't automatically siding with her. And she knew it. I watched as she shifted, tapping her fingers against her wine glass, her nails making a soft click, click, click against the delicate crystal. Then, as if flipping a switch, she let out a soft, amused chuckle and glanced around the table. I don't know why we're making such a scene, she said lightly. It's my birthday, after all. Let's not ruin a perfectly lovely evening over a silly mistake. She reached for her glass, raising it slightly. To new beginnings. No one moved. No one clinked their glasses. The air was thick, suffocating. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table, and locked eyes with her. You sound nervous, Lorraine. She let out another short laugh. Don't be absurd. I smiled. Slowly. Because I knew something she didn't. I took my phone out of my pocket and placed it face up on the table. The screen was still open to the email from the restaurant. The one proving that the reservation, the expensive orders, the entire bill had been linked to her personal credit card before being switched to my name at the last second. The email was in clear view, and my father saw it. His jaw tightened. His hand curled into a fist on the table. And Lorraine? She stilled. Just for a second. Then, carefully, she set her champagne glass down. That proves nothing, she said, her voice measured. I raised an eyebrow. It proves you planned this. It proves you're looking for something to blame me for, she shot back smoothly. Which is nothing new, Evan. You've resented me from the moment I married your father. There it was. The same old card she had always played. I shook my head, chuckling under my breath. You're good, Lorraine. I'll give you that. I gestured toward my father. But I think your act is starting to wear thin. My father still hadn't said a word. He was just watching, studying. I could see it in his face, the doubt, the frustration, the realization that maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong about her all these years. Lorraine must have sensed it too, because she suddenly turned toward him, her expression softening again. Henry, she murmured, reaching for his hand once more. You know me. You know I'd never do something like this. He pulled his hand away. Again. And this time, the flicker of doubt in her eyes was impossible to miss. She recovered quickly, but I saw it. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Why don't we ask the restaurant manager? Lorraine stiffened. What? I turned toward the waiter, who had been standing awkwardly nearby, pretending not to listen but very clearly hanging on to every word. Would you mind bringing out your manager? I asked politely. I'd love to clear this up. The waiter hesitated, glancing between Lorraine and my father, before finally nodding. Of course, sir. Lorraine's fingers dug into the tablecloth. That was it. That was checkmate. I could see the wheels turning in her head, scrambling for an escape route. But for the first time ever, there wasn't one. And she knew it. I watched her closely as she straightened her posture, forcing an airy smile. This is all so unnecessary, she said lightly. Why don't we just, Lorraine? My father's voice cut through the air like a knife. She stopped, turned, and for the first time in years, he wasn't looking at her the way he used to. He wasn't looking at her with admiration, or patience, or even love. He was looking at her like a stranger, like someone he didn't quite recognize anymore. She swallowed, and for the first time that night, maybe for the first time ever, she looked scared. But we weren't done yet. Not even close. Lorraine's perfectly polished exterior was starting to crack. I could see it in the way she kept shifting in her seat, in the way her fingers curled just a little too tightly around the stem of her glass. She wasn't in control anymore, and that terrified her. The waiter disappeared toward the back of the restaurant, presumably to fetch the manager. The table remained silent, except for the faint clinking of silverware as a few guests awkwardly poked at their untouched plates. My father sat rigid in his chair, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Lorraine with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Not anger. Not yet. Just disappointment. And somehow, I think that hit her harder. Lorraine let out a small breath, then turned to my father, forcing a soft, almost wounded smile. "Henry," she murmured, her voice low, intimate. "Are we really doing this? Right now? In front of everyone?" She gestured subtly around the table, as if to remind him of the guests still watching, their discomfort thick in the air. My father didn't answer. He just continued staring at her. And the longer he stayed silent, the more her confidence wavered. Finally, Lorraine exhaled sharply through her nose and turned back toward me. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "You want to play this game? Let's play." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, sweetheart, you've been playing since the day you married my father. I'm just finally calling you out on it." A flicker of something, rage, maybe, flashed across her face before she smoothed it away. "God, you really are pathetic," she spat under her breath, just quiet enough that only I could hear. I just smiled. "And yet, you're the one sweating." She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the restaurant manager arrived, a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense expression. "Is there a problem?" he asked, glancing between me, my father, and Lorraine. I gestured toward the bill still sitting on the table. "Yeah, we'd love some clarification on this charge." The manager's gaze flickered down. He scanned the paper, his forehead creasing slightly. "Ah, yes. This was processed under Mr. Caldwell's name, per the reservation details." I nodded. "And who made the reservation?" He hesitated. Then, slowly, he turned toward Lorraine. "This was arranged through Ms. Caldwell's assistant." Silence. A beat passed. Then another. I turned back toward Lorraine, giving her a moment to explain herself. She didn't. Because she couldn't. I watched as she struggled to keep her composure, her lips pressing together into a thin, forced smile. "There must be some mistake," she said lightly. The manager gave her a polite, practiced smile, the kind that said he didn't get paid nearly enough to deal with whatever this was. "We have the email confirmation on file. Would you like me to pull it up?" More silence. Lorraine's fingers twitched on the table. She knew she was caught, and for the first time all night, she had no way out. I could see the wheels turning in her head, scrambling for some kind of excuse. But what could she say? That the restaurant itself was lying? I glanced at my father. His face was blank. But his hands? His hands were clenched into tight fists on the table. And then, slowly, he exhaled. "Cancel the bill," he said, his voice eerily calm. The manager nodded immediately. "Of course, sir." He turned and walked away, leaving the rest of us sitting in thick, unbearable silence. I leaned back in my chair, watching Lorraine carefully. "You want to explain what just happened? Or should we all just pretend we didn't see you get caught red-handed?" She shot me a glare so sharp it could cut glass. Then, once again, she turned to my father. "Henry," she murmured, her voice softer, sweeter. "You don't actually believe I would do something like this, do you?" My father didn't answer right away. He just looked at her. And for the first time in years, I saw it. I saw him really looking at her. Not the version of her she had carefully curated, not the charming, elegant woman she had convinced him she was. The real her. Manipulative. Cold. Cruel. And I think it finally hit him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accident. This was just who she was. My father inhaled sharply, then reached for his napkin, dabbing at the corners of his mouth before setting it neatly on the table. "I think we should go," he said simply. Lorraine blinked. "What?" I said we should go. He pushed back his chair, standing up. "I've had enough for tonight." For the first time all evening, Lorraine actually looked panicked. "Henry," she said quickly, reaching for his arm. "You're overreacting. It was just a joke." "No," he cut in. "It wasn't." Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something else, but my father was already stepping away from the table. I stood as well, taking my time, adjusting my jacket as I met Lorraine's stunned expression with a small, satisfied smile. "I guess the joke's on you, huh?" I said quietly. Her eyes darkened. My father turned to the rest of the guests, offering a tight, polite nod. "Apologies for the disruption," he said. "Please, enjoy the rest of the evening." Then, without another word, he walked away. I watched as Lorraine sat there, frozen, completely blindsided. For the first time since she had inserted herself into our lives, she wasn't the one pulling the strings. And she had no idea what to do about it. But she wasn't done yet. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And honestly, I was looking forward to whatever came next. Because for once, she was playing my game. And I wasn't going to lose. Lorraine sat frozen in her chair, her perfectly curated world crumbling around her. For years, she had manipulated, schemed, and controlled everything in her orbit. But now, she had lost control, and she knew it. I followed my father out of the restaurant, stepping into the crisp Manhattan air. The city hummed around us, cars honking, people laughing, lights flickering against the pavement. But in that moment, it felt like we were in our own little bubble of realization. My father hadn't said a word since we left the table. He just stood there, staring at the ground, his hands shoved into his pockets. I wasn't sure what to say, so I waited. Finally, after a long moment, he exhaled and looked at me. How long have you known? The question caught me off guard. I blinked. Known what? He ran a hand over his face. That she was like this. I let out a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. A while. He nodded, like he had expected that answer. Then, quieter, why didn't you tell me? I frowned. Dad, I did. You just didn't want to hear it. His jaw clenched. Not in anger at me, at himself. And that was new. For years, he had defended Lorraine. Every time I pointed out her behavior, every time she made a snide comment or excluded me from something important, he had brushed it off, convinced that I was overreacting. But now, finally, he saw her for who she really was. He exhaled again, rubbing the bridge of his nose. God, I've been such a fool. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was settling in all on its own. He turned toward me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, regret. I should have listened to you, he admitted. I let that sink in for a moment before nodding. Yeah, you should have. He let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. What the HLL was I thinking? I didn't answer that, either. Because honestly, I didn't know. But I did know one thing. Lorraine wasn't going to go down without a fight. And I was right. The next morning, Lorraine did exactly what I expected her to do. She went into full damage control mode. She spent the entire day calling my father's friends, his colleagues, even distant family members, anyone who would listen. Spinning the story, playing the victim. Evan humiliated me at my own birthday dinner. He's always hated me. He's trying to turn Henry against me. It was just a simple mistake with the reservation, but he blew it out of proportion. The usual. But the problem? Nobody believed her. Not this time. Because my father had already started telling people the truth. And once the truth was out, the lies didn't stand a chance. A week later, Lorraine sat across from my father in their lawyer's office, her face pale as she stared at the divorce papers in front of her. She had tried everything, pleading, manipulating, threatening. Nothing worked. Because my father? He was done. He had seen the real her. And once that illusion was shattered, there was no putting it back together. I wasn't in the room for that final conversation, but I heard about it later. She begged. She cried. She told him he was throwing everything away. And he simply responded, "No, Lorraine. I'm finally getting it back." 2 months later, she was gone. The best part? She walked away with nothing. My father's lawyers were ruthless. Lorraine had signed a prenup when they got married, something she had been so sure she could work around if the time ever came. She was wrong. She got no alimony, no cushy settlement. She had to move out of the townhouse, back to some mediocre condo in New Jersey, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. And me? I got my father back. For the first time in years, we actually talked. We started meeting up for coffee on Sundays. He asked about my life, actually listened when I talked. It wasn't perfect, not overnight, but it was real. And Lorraine? She tried to stay relevant for a while, posting cryptic messages on social media, trying to make it seem like she had left him instead of the other way around. But eventually, she faded into the background. Because people like Lorraine, they only thrive when they have an audience. And once they lose it, they have nothing. And that was the best revenge of all.